Yes, I'm really excited that we have finally, after 15 months and various cancelled sessions, really excited to have Louise come on this podcast to share with us what were some of the outputs of her Doctorate of Public Works based on the sales apprenticeship business that we are now in. But before we start, I just want to set a little bit of context about Louise. So I think Louise is looking a bit worried now, wondering what I'm about to say. But Louise is, as far as sales is concerned, probably is the UK's leading expert on sales apprenticeships, particularly for the level 6 and the senior sales leader program. She's been involved in this right from ground zero, whilst the ideas were being formed, and we'll go into that a bit later on. But she has played an enormously important part in the whole issue and challenge of professionalising sales. So the sales profession has a huge amount to be grateful for the work that Louise has done. So we're going to go into the outputs of her dissertation a little bit later on, but I would first of all like to start with the doctorate that Louise has done, and in particular the Doctorate of Public Works, because when we talk about doctorates, there are research-based doctorates, there are PhDs, there's doctorates of professional practice, and then there's a Doctorate of Public Work. So I think it would be good to hand over to Louise to talk a little bit about what is a Doctorate of Public Works.
Okay, thanks, Phil. So the doctorate I completed, the title is actually Doctorate in Professional Studies by Public Works. And the Public Works, it's a wonderful program because it's there to encourage and support practitioners who have achieved or published a body of work or published something that is out there in the public domain that they have really helped to develop. And it's an opportunity for them to achieve a doctorate through looking at what they've produced, looking at what's been published, and critiquing it. So really critiquing at what they have actually produced. So whereas most, as you say, research doctorates, you're doing that research, and that is the work that you're developing for your doctorate. Here, the Public Works has been produced, and the doctorate is really focusing on critiquing that and looking at what's been achieved, what could have been done better, what else is there still to happen. So the kind of the lens of critique is really at the Public Works.
Do you know, I don't know whether the Doctorate of Public Works is a concept that exists outside of the UK.
There aren't that many universities in the UK that even deliver a doctorate through Public Works. It is quite unique. It's obviously focusing again on professionals, and many of the universities are focusing on their research doctorates. Yeah. So I don't know if it's outside of the UK.
Yeah, sure. I agree. I think it is an amazing. It's an amazing opportunity for people to work at doctorate level. So let's now move into the chosen public works that was the focus of your doctorate.
So the public works, 3 public works that I chose to bring in are the Level 6 B2B Sales Professional Apprenticeship Standard. So that was delivered collaboratively, with the Trailblazer Group, but very much kind of driven through, that whole process was driven through by myself. Then the Level 6 degree program itself, developed with Middlesex University, and the Level 7 Senior Sales Leader program, which is an adaptation of the Senior Leader Standard specifically for sales leaders.
So you rightly say that you were responsible for pushing through and organising the various members of that initial trailblazer group that was pulled together to help shape what the standard should be. And I was one of those members, and I can remember actually it was an entirely positive experience, I would say, that we had. The Trailblazer Group, just so that you know, consisted of a number of large enterprises, but a number of small enterprises, pulled together under the auspices of what the government wanted to happen in terms of pushing through proposals for different apprenticeship programs. And it was incredible, very collaborative, great fun, led by Louise as project managing, but with Graham sort of chairing the Trailblazer Group. I think that was his title. Have I got
Davis.
that? Yeah, Graham Davis, chairing the group. But it was amazing. And the great thing about I think the Trailblazer Group is that it represented a real cross section of different types of business, with the purpose of actually setting a standard for what's required in the area of knowledge, skills, and behaviours for salespeople, B2B salespeople. So that was amazing. I'm sure Louise is going to go into that whole kind of journey, perhaps in a bit of detail when we start to ask her more questions. But one of the exciting things I felt about this whole journey was that it was the first time in the UK that such a concept had been developed. You know, it was the first time that we were trying to work together with the Trailblazer Group to form this undergraduate sales degree opportunity for people coming into sales. And it was such an exciting kind of journey to be part of, I would say. And I think everyone working within that group was totally energized by the whole process. But ably steered by you, who navigated the various hurdles we had to get through in order to get it accepted. So the standard is a key element of one of your public works, and it may be where we should start, maybe talking about okay, you've helped create this public work, the standard, national standard that's now been set. Could you give us a bit more context around what that entailed and why it was so important?
Wow, of course. So just first of all, apprenticeships and through the levy and the standards are within England, not the UK, just so...
Stand corrected,
yes.
Thank you. Yes.
But so what did it entail to produce that? Well, as you've already mentioned, we formed the Trailblazer Group, which needed to consist of at least 12 organisations, and we got up to 15 in the end. But really important that it did have that cross-section across the different sectors, because it's a standard that should apply for all sectors and all organisations, large and small. So it was... really fascinating, wasn't it? That whole group was amazing. And you're right, such a positive experience to get everybody in the room. And it was so positive because everyone had the same shared goal. I think if you have a shared goal like that, it just, develops this kind of the collaboration that we achieved in those sessions. And, the shared goal was obviously to produce a degree in sales, the first degree that there would be in sales in England in any university, because particularly for B2B sales. Many universities might have a marketing program with a sales module, but there wasn't a degree that was going to be dedicated to salespeople and B2B salespeople. So that was a shared goal, and linked to that very much was the to professionalise sales, to get it out there, to get it recognised as a profession of choice. And everybody in that room just shared those two goals. And, there was a compromise. I think with collaboration comes compromise, and people wanted to use certain terms, or they did things one way in their organisation and somebody else was doing it in another way. But that was also amazing about the Trailblazer group, that everybody was learning from each other about what happened in different organizations and how different people might approach B2B selling. So it was just, a room full of creativity and good ideas. And in the end, after bouncing a few thoughts around, we approached it by going through the sales cycle. So the standard is very much, you see it as you progress down the standard, that it talks about prospecting and sales planning, and then might move into developing a proposal. And you have to put the knowledge and the skills and behaviours of a B2B sales professional onto 2 pages. So that was quite a challenge in itself. So we start to, have the knowledge and the skills being psychology of sales or digital selling, working with others. So there were lots of areas for negotiation, agreement, but we got there. Really, we started in the April, and we were able to submit a version of the standard, first version, because it did go through a couple of iterations once it went to the government, to IFATE. But by the December, so that was amazing, considering what we were condensing down into 2 sides of paper. But super.
So it was interesting reading your dissertation that you wanted to reflect on the 3 different public works. And I know we've just talked about the standard so far, but through 4 key themes. And I think it's important we talk about these themes because I think they're incredibly relevant today as they were when you did your dissertation. But the themes that you selected were stigma, the stigma of sales, I guess it was of sales, employer culture, bureaucracy, and complexity. And that comes through quite early. So you'd obviously, when you were doing your reflection of all of the 3 public works, decided that you felt that these themes were things that would weave their way somehow throughout the different reflections that you did. And I just wonder why do you think these themes are important? Why did you select those 4?
Well, I didn't select them early on. I mean, the stigma of sales came in quite early on because obviously that has been around for a long time. But the others really emerged as I was critiquing what had been produced. So these were more the emerging themes that were coming through, particularly as I was looking at the delivery of the programs in terms of the employer culture.
Yeah.
But stigma, there were 2 components to the stigma. There is the stigma around sales and having a career in sales. And there's 2 sort of approaches to that. So you have the fact that people don't like to talk about money, that they think sales is, we've already talked about, perhaps as an inferior discipline to marketing. And, that's been around as a sort of concept for a while. So there is, what do generally people think about money? Do they think it's an ethical profession? There's all those kind of questions around the stigma of sales. But also in universities, as I've started to develop the apprenticeship programs through Middlesex University and also with Leeds Trinity for a while, you realise that academics weren't interested in sales, that there is a stigma there, and that kind of knocks on to why do people also not consider sales. So if it's not available as a discipline in a university, why would people at schools be saying, have you thought about a degree in sales? Because there wasn't one.
Yeah.
So, it just kind of has a knock-on impact everywhere that that sales just hasn't been recognised. And I do think we're shifting it. I really think we're changing it. But at the time, that was a big thing. And academics also, many of them like to work in their disciplines and research in their disciplines, and degree apprenticeships are harder to deliver. So there was also less people perhaps wanting to get involved in the delivery of degree apprenticeships at the very beginning. I think that's shifting again. You know, they are now recognised as the most amazing, fantastic thing to really help people earn a degree through their work, and earn while they learn. It's very much they are fantastic, but universities are having to adapt to deliver degree apprenticeships. It's new for them, and particularly when the public works were produced, that was something that I was very aware of and was quite apparent as we were working with them. Yeah.
If we go back to the what I found, the Trailblazer group, there were a number of universities involved right at the very beginning. There was Middlesex, there was East Anglia, I think, and Portsmouth.
Anglia Ruskin.
Anglia Ruskin and Portsmouth.
And Portsmouth, yeah.
Yeah. And, what's quite interesting is, how many of those universities have actually continued, even though they were involved in the standard, to actually offer that through their universities. So, and I'm not sure that they have done.
No, they haven't. So the three universities on the Trailblazer were Middlesex University, Anglia Ruskin and Portsmouth. And out of those three, Middlesex University is the only one delivering the B2B sales professional with ourselves, as a joint venture. I think for, the funding band that we were awarded is probably, again, evidence of stigma, towards sales. So at the time, most degree apprenticeships were being awarded a funding band of 27,000. Initially, we were offered a funding band of 18, and through an appeal process, we got that up to 21,000. But it is really tough to deliver a degree, let alone a degree apprenticeship, at 21,000, because there is more work involved in a degree apprenticeship. Yeah. So I suspect, I think at the time the funding that was awarded was a prohibitor for the other two universities. Yeah.
It's quite interesting because that you talk about the stigma of sales and the stigma of apprenticeships, and then you've also got, I guess, what drives the stigma. Well, what are the sort of public perception, but you've also got political perception as well. And I remember sort of being invited to an event at the House of Lords with Middlesex, where we had a number of members of Parliament together with people from the House of Lords actually attending a discussion about apprenticeships. And as we introduced ourselves around the table, I mentioned sales. The room went a bit quiet. And they said, sales, what do you mean by sales? So I had to explain to these learned brethren that I was sitting next to, what it was. And then they said, actually, I suppose you could say we sell. It was rather funny. But actually, I think there's this real challenge that we've got, we being in the profession, to try and change that stigma. And I think in a way the journey that we've been on with this recognition by the government that actually, do you remember when we got that letter back from the government saying, actually we do recognise B2B sales as being worthy of being considered a profession? Yeah. That in itself was kind of amazing news.
Yeah, no, it really was. It was just mind-blowing at the time, wasn't it, for everybody? It was fantastic and a huge celebration. And, as you say, recognition, finally, that sales could be considered a profession. Yeah.
One of the things that you mention in your dissertation, if you don't mind me sort of reading out some of the things from that, is that you set the context of sales, I think, within the contribution of sales to the annual economic output of the country. And the figures are staggering. 44% of UK's annual economic output is connected back to this whole area of B2B sales, which is 1.7 trillion. Yeah. The APPG, sorry, what was the APPG? The Association...
All-Party Parliamentary Group. That the ISP created.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. That was the All-Party Parliamentary Group. also sort of were championing at the time the importance of actually looking at sales. I mean, I've said for many years that I think sales is one of the most important functions of any business. Without sales, businesses can't exist. And we know the number of people who work in sales.
Yeah.
Was it 600,000, I think you mentioned,
Yeah.
in your doctorate. So you've got this huge body of people for whom there's been no sort of recognition that, the contribution that they're making economically to the country, and for whom up until this moment of getting this standard accepted and then the opportunity to develop a degree, nothing had been done for them. So it's massive. I mean, it annoys me that it's taken so long. I mean, I'm greatly pleased that we've got here, but it's been such a long journey, and well deserved.
Yeah, I don't know.
So
I agree.
you don't know what to say,
No, I mean,
because
I agree.
you were.
It is.
Yeah.
And more is happening. Obviously, with the level 6 program. There's a level 4 apprenticeship now for sales executive. There is a level 3 for a technical sales person.
Yeah.
And the ISP are putting together some accredited programs. So
Right.
more is happening.
Yeah.
But at the time, this was the first program.
Right.
Yeah, which was huge. It really was.
I mean, the other, you have a huge passion for coaching, and I think that what's interesting is how you started to use that passion for coaching in the way you thought you'd approach your dissertation, and created a framework for coaching. And I know that we won't go through it kind of in detail for each of the public works that you have, but what made you decide to actually use a coaching framework to actually approach the way you started to reflect on these public works that were created?
So a significant part of the doctoral program was to create a conceptual framework to critique your works. That is a huge part. That is one of the deliverables. Everybody has to come up with their own framework to critique their public works.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, where do you start? And I spent months going round and round and round in circles, wondering how could I critique my public works. And then, I went for a walk. I can remember it to this day. Going for a walk thinking, I've got to come up with a framework because I've really got to write this chapter.
Yeah.
And then I just thought, right, I'll sort of try and coach myself. And as I said that, I just thought, well, I can do it as a coaching framework. Why haven't I thought of that? So this idea came that I could actually critique the public works through the development of a coaching framework.
Yeah.
And once I come to that realization, you can then write that chapter about how you created the framework.
Yeah. But you also use that to structure your commentary on the public works.
Well, that's what you do. You create the framework, and then you use the framework to critique your works. That's what.
Right.
So everybody comes up. Every doctoral student will have their own framework that they've produced.
Yeah.
And they use that to critique their public works.
Yeah.
As part of the program. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if we want to go. It's up to you whether we want to go into the framework itself, but you've come up with a framework around CEDA where you start to explore the context. You've got E, which is everyone, so presumably that's
all the stakeholders that are involved.
Key stakeholders in those different programs, the dynamics, awareness and reflection and reflexivity coming in at the end of it all. So there's a very structured approach that you've taken to the way you started to reflect on the public works. And I guess to some extent we've done this already with the apprenticeship standard. But it may be that you'd just like to add a few more, now that you've gone through this public work with the standard and you stand back and look at that particular public work, is there anything that you'd like to add to what we've discussed so far that we haven't yet covered?
I think we've discussed the context and, Yeah, as you say, everyone is the stakeholders. So in that particular public works, it was obviously the employees of the Trailblazer Group, ourselves, thinking about the apprentices, but also IFATE. So IFATE were very much involved in that. Dynamics, there's the shifting world of apprenticeship policy and the guidance that was coming in.
It changed, didn't it? Changed all the time.
Changed, still does. And so then out of that, there was like, what did I notice? You know, reflecting back. So the awareness is kind of thinking about, as I mentioned earlier, those kind of just communities of practice, that we were there as a community of practice to, with this shared goal of producing the standard, but also professionalising sales, starting something much bigger. So I did quite a bit of reflection on the benefits of that and just how you can all learn through each other, and there was an awful lot around that. It was just the sheer energy that was achieved during that period. And then, reflecting what we produced, there was a standard, there's definitely a benchmark there now that was used in organisations for their own competency frameworks. People started to use the standard in other areas as well. So just starting to really recognise, everything that could just happen out of 1 2-page document was quite interesting. And I think, it's very easy in the development of the standard and then to go straight into developing the degree, because we had employers waiting for this degree program, for the apprenticeship program, not to realise what had been achieved just through that process. And it was a lot more than just a 2-page apprenticeship standard. So I think writing that section was really just very interesting to think, we did that too, and that happened.
I think that's massive, because I think even outside the apprenticeship, I think like you were saying just earlier, you quite often come across organisations who want to set up some sort of sales academy, and they don't quite know how to structure the academy, and what knowledge, skills and behaviours do they need to consider as they're building up the competencies required for high-performing sales teams. But I think, so just the identification of the knowledge, skills and behaviours is one thing. The other is, how do you assess against it? Because I remember, there was a lot of, yes, okay, they're there, we've done the 2-pager, but how do you assess whether people have reached the level 6? And that's a key component of it.
Yeah, no, that was huge. So having developed the standard, we then had to develop the apprenticeship, the endpoint assessment plan. Not so straightforward.
No, I think that was the more complex bit of the whole process.
It was, it worked well as within the Trailblazer Group, and then, we had to get that approved by IFATE, and language really mattered there. But, how do you assess it? We have a well-established endpoint assessment process now that was approved by IFATE. So, they have to record evidence in a learning journal or evidence log of achieving how they've achieved those knowledge, skills and behaviours, which needs to be robust evidence and validated, and triangulated ideally with line manager feedback or customer feedback. They present a pitch or deliver a pitch to a panel. They have a discussion with the panel about their reflections and their evidence log.
And the panel are sales practitioners as well? Is that right?
One sales practitioner and one person from the university. So a panel of 2. And they also produce a work-based project, which is part of that assessment. So, it's not an easy program. There's a lot they have to achieve. There's a lot they have to demonstrate. It's obviously a 3-year program. But the endpoint assessment is, it's rigorous. It has to be. It's been approved by IFATE. But to date, we've had, 100% success rate, which is absolutely fantastic.
That's amazing.
No, it is.
But I think that, that going back to that Trailblazer, I think the assessment was actually one of the more complex aspects to it. And I think there are these 2 dimensions that were really powerful kind of outputs, and that's great. Okay, so I think we've talked about the apprenticeship standard, and we've got two others to talk about as well, which is the B2B sales professional public work. So I wonder what you could share about your reflections of, I guess, the evolvement of the B2B. I guess we'll be looking at it through our lens because we help sort of create the curriculum with Middlesex University and so on. But
I think what's really unique about the B2B sales professional program is that it was a brand new degree program with brand new modules. We weren't trying to bring in existing content from other university programs. And you may not remember, but for me, it's I think it was just such an exciting morning when we sat down with Darryl Bravenbull from Middlesex with a blank sheet of paper and then said, right, we're going to design a degree program, let's build it. And it was just fantastic, that after a sort of hour and a half discussion, we had the outline for the program and the names for the modules that we were going to deliver. And we were starting to think about the assessment methods that we would bring in for each module. So that was just one of those really lovely moments, within the whole process. So once we had that, there is a very structured process to get a degree approved, through the university. So we had to put a lot of documentation together to sort of obviously add the detail to the modules and the learning outcomes and, what was the syllabus going to be, what would the reading list be, and the assessment. So really putting all of that detail behind each module and, going through a validation panel to get the degree apprenticeship approved. So very much, a sort of jointly delivered program with Middlesex. So we were providing the sales expertise into the sales content into the program, and Middlesex providing that work-based, work-integrated kind of rigor, the academic rigor to make sure that was being met. And we, our first cohort started in February 2018, which was just the most amazing day. I can remember them walking into the room and just they're feeling like this is it. We're actually delivering, this program that we've created.
Did we deliver that very first module in the town hall at Hendon? And was that the one where the Lord, the mayor came in? That was another one. Was it? Was that cohort 2?
Cohort 2 had the mayor.
I don't know. It was quite fun though.
But no, we were on the main campus at the university, and we had 20 apprentices starting that day, and fantastic. Yeah, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, very special moment.
It was a big moment, absolutely. And I guess, the lenses that you talked about, or the themes, stigma, employer culture, bureaucracy and complexity, kind of is fed through into the way these themes emerged in building the programs, assessing the programs. Could you talk a bit about employer culture, because it's a new concept? I mean, it's and I know that a lot of the challenges were also working out who has what role in the way these programs are delivered.
Yeah. So, the success of an apprenticeship program, or the success for an apprentice, is really dependent on the support of the people they have around them in the workplace. And in particular, I would say the line manager, perhaps their team members. And so really by employer culture, I was defining that as the learning culture within the organisation. Because if you have a line manager who is going to help you find those opportunities to put your theoretical learning into practice in the workplace and help you with that and coach you through that, your learning is going to be so much greater than someone who hasn't had that support. And so that kind of learning culture is it's critical. It's critical for the success of a program. And what we've noticed really over a few cohorts is that, there are different types of employer cultures, let's say, learning cultures. So, You might have somewhere, and this is at the time, so I'm not saying it's necessarily the case now, but I think it still does apply. There are some employers who want to spend their levy, and so that's their number one focus. There are others who really do provide the best learning experience for their apprentices, and we've seen lots of evidence of that, which is fantastic. You might have somewhere, the most contact we have is really through apprenticeship teams within an organisation, and we used to be held perhaps a little bit removed from the line manager, but we've managed to break that down now. We hold employer forums. We're making sure we get much closer to the line manager, because it is so important that we know what they're thinking, what they're doing, and how they can help the apprentice. So that's really what the employer culture is about. It's about the learning culture, making sure that those apprentices get opportunities to learn. And I think I'm really passionate about this, and I would say it stems from Peter Critton. And, if you have the right learning culture, you're going to have line managers who are prepared to learn with that growth mindset from whatever the apprentices are bringing in. And I know we had one sort of tripartite session where the line manager was saying, we all know we're going to be working for Ollie, say, because he's just a star and he's coming back and telling us all the latest trends and themes, and we just know that's going to happen one day. And I think if you have a line manager like that who's willing to learn from you and willing to read sometimes, they were saying, oh yeah, I've gone and read the book that they were reading. How fantastic is that? Because they can talk about it with their apprentice.
Yeah.
Now, we're not expecting everyone to do that, but that's fantastic. But Peter used to talk about corporate capability, and apprenticeships can really help develop corporate capability, and that to me is about the learning culture.
Yeah, I remember doing a podcast with one of the team at Royal Mail, Simon, I think it was Simon Topley. Yeah. And he was talking about, his team. We had a very well-established people in his team already, many, many years, 30, 40 years experience of Royal Mail selling. And then you had these young apprentices coming in. And he painted quite a visual picture of you could always imagine them looking at these youngsters coming in as apprentices and wondering, what on earth are these youngsters going to do, because they don't know that much about what we do, and it's going to take a lot of our time to to coach them and to manage them, and how am I going to manage that? But what Simon described was how over a period of time they began to really embrace these youngsters coming through and learn from them. Yeah. And in fact, those young apprentices helped create a growth mindset, so to speak, with some of those around them. But I think that the way that Royal Mail have approached the apprenticeship is just one of the great examples. And it's great that I know that the Princess Royal Award was based around the way that they'd integrated their level 6 sales apprenticeship degree into the business. They did a great job, but it was just great to hear, those kind of stories emerging from managers. Yeah.
But you make a good point there. It is a demand on time for the line managers, and particularly in sales, that is quite hard sometimes if they've got their targets or their team's targets to achieve, and they're having to coach or mentor. So it's important that they are made aware of those demands before they can take on their apprentice, because it's really important to get it right.
You've spoken about the challenge of getting the degree validated by the university sort of earlier on, and we've started to talk about the way that the apprenticeship program is delivered over 3 years. You talked about the tripartite meetings with employees and line managers and so on. With the benefit now, I don't know how many people have come through the program or on the program since it started in 2018, but it's in the hundreds. If you reflect now as to the success of the program, or what you've seen emerge from it, what have been some of the insights that you've got? Well,
just for those numbers, first of all, we've had over 150 graduates on the B2
150 graduates. So that doesn't include those that are
and
currently
we
on
have
the
another
program.
150-ish
Oh, do we?
on the program.
Wow, so we have 300 now that have come
so
through.
it's great
It's
numbers.
amazing.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. So what have I noticed, did you ask?
Yes,
Yeah.
what have, we've gone through the pain of giving birth to this level 6 apprenticeship and all that was involved. And now we've evolved. I mean, it was 2018, so we've had 6 years now experience of running level 6. So as you reflect back on that journey, what have been some of the, conclusions you've come to, observations you've made?
So, I mean, conclusions are around, in a way, those themes, really. So how important the support of the organisation is and that kind of, as I say, the learning culture around the apprentice is critical. And for us to understand that and to also be able to coach both the apprentice, and if in a tripartite we can talk to line managers about it, the more we can get to understand the world of the apprentice, the better. Now, we do that through reading their projects, because obviously they're work-based projects. We do that through looking at the learning journals and through the tripartites, but just understanding from the line managers themselves, which is why we now hold the employer forums to try and encourage them to attend those and understand so we'll hold one a year, so at the beginning of each year, and also one towards the endpoint assessment, so they really know how they can support their apprentice. And I think by getting closer to the employers, that's been huge. So I think that's been a big learning, to get as close as you can. And obviously that's, a whole part of the whole tripartite relationship anyway. So that's a very important thing, to really get to understand the apprentices' world so you can help them through those projects and the application of that learning. I think they are not easy programs to deliver. There's a lot of asks, from IFATE and from the ESFA, in terms of the government requirements for the programs. So that comes in on top of the degree requirements from a university, on top of what the employers want to get for their individual apprentices. So there's a lot to juggle as a training provider. So that's a big notice. But obviously, the successes are just make it all worthwhile when you read some of the projects and understand how they have learned and developed as an individual, as a sales professional. When you see them graduate and look at their progression as they leave the program, and we've got over 90% have moved into definitely another more senior role, if not two. The progression of our apprentices has been fantastic. So that validates the content of our program, that we know we're teaching them the right things.
I think quite early on we had a sense of the business impact of the apprentices, and in some cases I think sort of getting quite respectable levels of revenue and turnover from sales of the employers that they work for. And I think that was an eye-opener for me. Didn't expect necessarily for success to be seen quite so soon. And like you say, it's sort of, at the end of the day, why are we doing this? Of course, it's great to offer a degree, but at the end of the day, employers want to see a business benefit from it, and also things like retention and talent development as well. Yeah. So I think it's been amazing to see those boxes being ticked.
Yeah. I think too as well, what's been fantastic is, as a degree apprenticeship, yes, I guess the majority are school leavers, but we've had people coming in for a second job in sales or outside of sales to take up a career in sales. And, to have more mature students who didn't have that opportunity presented to them earlier in their careers or earlier in their, when they were leaving school, to then achieve a degree and set them up on this pathway in sales has been fantastic. Yeah,
I agree. Can we talk about the level 7? Yeah, which is the senior leader program.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that came to that through a slightly different route, I think, that public work. So I wonder if you could give some background.
Yeah, so the Senior Leader Standard was already developed as a generic standard for leaders, across all sectors. And so we felt there was a need, and we were being asked by some of the line managers of the apprentices, for a program that could support them in their development as a sales leader. And so we decided we actually tried to put in our own bid for a senior sales leader standard, but the government asked us to work to the generic one, so that was fine. And so we then tailored that standard to work, or delivered a program sort of against that standard for sales leaders, very much tailoring what was in the standard to make it relevant for senior sales leaders. And I think, really we felt that for professionalism and ethical sales to be really embedded in an organisation, it has to be there at all levels within the organisation. So we wanted to ensure that the same theories were being shared in sales, but also leadership theories for sales leaders. So we did have our own suite of masters programs from the executive masters that we deliver for leading sales transformation and key account management. So we were able to use some of that content to bring in for the senior leader standard. There were also different KSBs that we needed to address with the new senior leader program. So we kind of put the program together based on that and started running that from 2018. 19, I think it was the year after. And we've had, I think it's about 60 people go through the program now.
Yeah.
So it's...
No, we knew it was going to be an amazing program because of our experience with the exec masters. And I guess it came a little bit later after level 6 because I guess we're learning how to run apprenticeship programs.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
No, it has. I think it has been an amazing opportunity for people in sales management to also do a postgraduate degree. Originally, it was at master's level. Was that right? But it's not now.
Yeah. So originally it was at master's level, and then the standard was reviewed by IFATE, and they took out the mandatory degree element, and so that reduced the funding because they said that you didn't necessarily need to have the master's degree to become a senior leader.
Yeah.
So that reduced the funding. So now we deliver it as a postgraduate diploma with a master's top-up module.
Yeah. Okay. So that was the... so what are your reflections on the senior leader program? Yeah.
So within the thesis, I did merge the two degree programs together because really there were very similar types of reflections. The stigma, the employer culture is as relevant for senior leaders.
Yeah.
The bureaucracy goes across all apprenticeships, not just degree apprenticeships, it goes across them all.
Yeah.
And I think, that fourth theme around complexity was just really recognising all the dynamics that there are, that as a training provider you really have to juggle. I think maybe an additional one that was coming through was that we're very niche. We focus on sales programs, that's our expertise. And yet we still have to work to exactly the same rules and regulations as any other training provider who might have hundreds or thousands of apprentices, whereas ours are very much in, we have smaller cohorts and we're running 3 a year for the level 6 and 2 a year for the level 7. So it sort of feels like we've got an extra ask because we're doing everything, yet we're very niche. And but I think for me, that the fact we're so niche really supports what I think is the principle of an apprenticeship. A master supporting the apprentice. If we're sales experts, we're the right people to really be passing on that theory to the apprentices.
Not sort of
not
people just dealing
training providers.
Exactly, and I think that I think that's the reason why the programs are so engaging, because their practitioners are delivering most of the practical content of the program, which is most of the program actually, isn't it? Yeah. And that's at a leadership level as well as at a sales level.
Absolutely.
So it's so relevant to B2B sales.
I think maybe another thought coming out of the programs is that those programs which were run as mixed cohorts, again, you kind of amplify the learning. So we have a couple of in-house cohorts, but when it's an open cohort with apprentices from different organisations and different sectors, they are learning so much from hearing about each other's experiences and customer challenges or customer successes. And I think, mixed cohorts for me is the way that I would always prefer to be delivering an apprenticeship program.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. So we may have people listening into the podcast who are not based in England. Yeah, they could be international. Okay. Yeah. So I guess the question that could be posed is, would people from different countries potentially have access to the programs that we're talking about here?
As an apprenticeship program, no. Because obviously these are funded through the levy, and that's within England. But we have validated both programs to be standalone degree programs in their own right, so that when there were a couple of organisations who didn't want to preclude people who might have lived in Scotland and worked in Scotland from coming on the programme. So we had a mirror programme running, which they funded themselves, but meant that they could achieve the degree. So it is available. And we also run quite a bit of that content either as bespoke programmes. We have our executive master's program, so there is access to the content through different routes.
So if we're looking, kind of to the future, what are your thoughts about the future for these programs?
With an election coming, and we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, what changes come in from whichever government is successful, whenever the election is. It will have to stay. A degree program for a B2B sales professional has to stay there now. There is enough demand, as you've talked about. The business impact that's achieved is fantastic. So I hope it can stay as a degree apprenticeship program. We've talked about, trying to embed sales more into universities. Anyway, that's something that I think we can still try and encourage, Phil, through Consalia and our mission to make sales the most sought after profession. I think it's really important. We still keep championing that, and the ISP are doing the same. So it's ensuring that sales continues to grow in universities, that more people take it on as a discipline. I think we just have to make sure that happens. So in terms of how do we take the programs forward, we need to find a way. We need to find a way to make sure they continue.
I occasionally get invited onto podcasts that are led by people outside of the UK, like in America, and they're amazed at what we have here in the UK, in terms of the recognition, the support from government. The whole concept about the apprenticeships is incredibly innovative. You don't see that in many other countries around the world. So in spite of the battering and the bad press UK or England gets, depending on which entity we want to speak about, it's been a phenomenal sort of innovation, I think. It's a big step forward. And I just hope it doesn't, it gets continued support no matter which government is in power. But
I think apprenticeships and the levy-funded apprenticeships are a huge success story. There are some people who think, perhaps the levy isn't a good way to achieve the apprenticeships, but, to bridge the skills gap, which was one of the reasons for, you know, putting the levy in place and for building the programs. You know, we are definitely achieving that in our space. You know, to help with social inequality, people can get degrees without having to pay huge fees. Degree apprenticeships are the absolutely fantastic thing,
Yeah.
and I would certainly support anyone lobbying to keep them going if they're put at
Yeah.
risk. Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we're probably getting towards the end of the podcast, Louise.
Okay.
Are there any things that you would like to kind of mention before we wrap up? I mean, there's one, you know, if people want to know more about the apprenticeships, I guess they can come to you or contact us through the website. And, you know, how can people learn more about it if this is new to them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. If it's something they want to know more about, they can get in touch with myself or with Luke, you know, or anyone at Consalia. We're always passionate about talking about them.
For sure.
There's a lot of information on the website as well, so that could be a starting point, and then get in touch with ourselves. And, you know, if they want to ever talk to some of our graduate apprentices, I'm sure that's something we could arrange too. Yeah.
So, Louise, thank you so much. And I think you can tell from the interview that we've just had the hugely important role that Louise has played in helping us as a profession. So we have an awful lot to thank Louise for. So thank you, Louise.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Phil.